So, after more than 2 decades of watching anime, I finally sat my ass down and watched Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time. This was an anime series that I had been hearing about for years, but also a series that I ultimately knew very little about before going into it. I heard it was dark, I heard it was polarizing, I heard it was genius, revolutionary, overrated, extremely difficult to understand, super depressing, super disappointing, super horny, and 100 other positive and negative things. But all I knew for sure was, it was something that I had to see and judge for myself. Just as a disclaimer of sorts. This video was originally supposed to be this grandiose hour-long review of the entire Evangelion series, a review that would serve as some epic diatribe that delved deeply into all aspects of my praise and criticisms of the series. But about an hour into writing the script for that video, I realized literally nobody gives a shit about that.
Don't care, don't care, don't care, still don't care. I don't care, I don't.
I was the one making the damn video, and even I didn't want to sit through it. So I decided to do what the writer of Evangelion probably should have done, and narrowed my focus. What were the parts of Evangelion that stood out the most to me? What aspects of the series had the biggest impact on me? And what did I end up caring about the most? The answer I came back to for every question was always Shinji Ikari, the main character of Evangelion. Not just because of how intriguing of a character he is within the scope of the show, but also how intriguing the idea of him as a character in the grander scope of literary tropes is. For everyone who watches Evangelion, Shinji's character becomes a lightning rod of audience frustrations. Based on my experiences in discussing the show with others, he's probably one of the most hated main characters in the history of anime. But is the hatred and vitriol his character evokes from people really deserved? As someone who grew up a pretty shy and fearful kid with the weight of daunting expectations that come with having 2 intelligent engineers for parents and an equally smart and ambitious older sister in the same household, I guess you could say a large part of me really resonates with Shinji as a character. All I knew of Shinji before watching Evangelion was the infamous beef stroganoff scene in the hospital. That, and everyone who I talked about the show with, described him as, quote, a whiny little bitch.
Not only a little bitch of a thing, a silly little hillbilly.
Needless to say, my expectations for how much I would like this character were not very high when I started watching. But after watching all 26 episodes of the series and the following movie, I gotta say, everybody was right. Shinji is without question a whiny little bitch, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But despite that, I don't really hate him for it. Given the circumstances that Shinji was raised in and the insane amount of pressure placed on him from his peers and piece of shit father, makes total sense to me that a shy 14-year-old boy would consistently crumble under the weight of those expectations. It doesn't make it any less annoying when he continually folds under pressure and just runs away from his problems, only to quickly realize that his friends and family are quite literally dying due to his cowardice, so he comes running back, usually moments after his comrades have been brutally defeated, and does what he was born to do. Pilot the Eva. Oh, and real quick while we're on the subject, I have to give this show props for designing some of the dopest mech suits I've ever seen. This show is almost as old as I am, and I swear the Eva designs would still look cutting edge even in today's landscape. But back to Shinji. This might sound stupid, but my issue with Shinji has less to do with the character, and more how the character is written. What I mean by that is, having a story revolve around a young, insecure boy trying to find himself while thrust into a cruel and dangerous world is not inherently a bad idea. In fact, it's an extremely common trope that I happen to really love when it's executed well. The issue with Shinji's character is that he's written as too much of an extreme of this trope. It's to the point where his incessant self-doubt, constant failures, and seemingly incurable social awkwardness almost come off as satire by the time you reach the midway point of the story, rather than gripping character fiction. The shortcomings of Shinji's character are a microcosm of the issues of Evangelion as a whole to me. All of the pieces for not just a good, but a fucking amazing series are here. But it's like all of those ingredients were carelessly mixed with all of the ingredients of a god-awful series as well. Some of the notable issues being horrible pacing, plot lines and character motivations that are poorly explained or go nowhere, meandering middle episodes that feel pointless in the grand scheme of the narrative, and a wildly inconsistent tone from scene to scene throughout the entire story. To put it simply, I don't think I've ever been more conflicted about my opinions of a piece of art than how I am when I think of Evangelion. It's the greatest mixed bag of quality that I've ever watched. Watching Evangelion is like eating one of those bags of gummy worms where half of the worms are one flavor and the other half is a different flavor. Except with Evangelion, one half is your favorite flavor ever, and the other half is just literal dog shit. No offense to anyone who might happen to enjoy dog shit, but much like the people who enjoy Evangelion, I'm sure you realize why the people who don't like this series feel that way, right? I know I'm far from the first person to feel this way about this show, but if you do love Evangelion, I don't want it to seem like I'm shitting on you or telling you that your opinion is wrong, because honestly, I get why people love this show too. This series is so f***ing unique that I think it could be classified as a masterpiece of anime based on its editing style and shot composition alone. It has a real Killer 7 feel to it for anyone who gets the reference. I love all of the jarring cuts at the end of scenes that are juxtaposed with frames that linger on for way longer than it feels like they should. This is often to reflect the specific tension between characters on screen in the moment. I don't know anything about the writer or creator of Evangelion, and that's on purpose. I usually like to keep my distance from behind-the-scenes knowledge of what goes into the art that I consume, unless it really speaks to me on a deep enough level. The reason I do this is because the more you know about something or someone, the easier it is to connect with them. And that connection always gives me a bias that I feel like I shouldn't have as the viewer. So I try to stay as detached from the inner workings as possible, as to preserve the purity of the viewing experience. God damn, that sentence sounded pretentious as f***. I've definitely been watching too much Neon Genesis. I'm starting to talk like a f***ing textbook. Anyway, I say all of that to say this. I don't know if this is true, but the final act of Evangelion feels like a depressed writer giving themselves some sort of pep talk through their own art in order to motivate themselves out of their depressive funk. In that regard, Shinji feels like an avatar for not just the viewer, but for the writer themselves. There's something simultaneously sad, endearing, and kind of gross about that. Writing 2/3 of a story that's mostly just a procedural, coming-of-age action anime and then pulling the rug out from under the audience's feet in the final act and making the story nosedive into one of the darkest pits of depression and despair that I've ever experienced is kind of fucked up when you think about it. But if you are a depressed person who has dedicated their lives to writing this story and this is the only way you can see to finish it, then I guess I understand, but still kind of fucked up. The same way I feel about Shinji is ultimately how I feel about the author of this story. They seem like sad, lonely, and awkward people who were given great expectations, but were also blessed with the ability to meet and even surpass those expectations when pushed to their limits. My experience of watching Evangelion was like watching a more pathetic version of myself create a character that was an even more pathetic version of themselves and put them through unimaginable physical and psychological trauma for 26 episodes in a feature-length movie. I don't know how many walls that breaks, but it feels like a lot. And I don't know if this is a common experience watching this show. I don't know if it's the intended experience either. But I can confidently say this. I did not have a good time watching a lot of Evangelion. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy other aspects of the show or that it was a waste of time. Even though I didn't like the way watching Evangelion made me feel, especially near the end, the fact that it was able to make me feel that strongly in the first place earned my respect. As I said before, Shinji Ikari is the main character of Evangelion, and he's the perfect microcosm of everything right and wrong with the series. Shinji is a whiny little bitch with little redeeming value, and even though he consistently fails and constantly runs from his problems, he always comes back and tries to make things right. He's far from perfect, but he never stops trying to better himself despite how much that process hurts him. I think that's a quality more people should have, you know? If nobody else is rocking with Shinji, I'm rocking with Shinji. The dick beating thing was wild though. Yeah, he was on some nut for that. I can't really support that. God, what a fucked up show. What a fucking depressing ass show. Jesus Christ. Fuck. So, this is usually where I wrap the video up with some heartfelt, quasi-motivational speech that connects the topic of the video to an important aspect of life. Well, as much as I would love to keep that tradition going, I've been left mentally drained as of late. Definitely in part to binging Evangelion these past couple weeks, but also due to some stress in my personal life. After writing this script and realizing that I will then have to record and edit everything else for this video, the weight of the task became a little too daunting and too much for me to handle right now. I know that when faced with a troubling future, it's important to stay grounded in the present, but sometimes things pile on a little too much, and it's impossible to stop that troublesome future from spilling over into your life. Maybe that's the message. Knowing when to quit. Knowing when to wave the white flag and saying enough is enough. Just like Shinji, you know? You have to run away from what causes you pain. But also like Shinji, maybe I'm just using that as a cop-out to give my ego an excuse. As valuable and necessary as hard work, determination, and persistence are to becoming successful, an over-reliance on those traits are often the same reason successful people decline and fall from greatness. Finding that balance isn't easy, but we all need rest. We all need a chance to regroup and maybe even reset from time to time in order to keep our minds and bodies in good health. Don't allow yourself to be overcome with shame or feelings of weakness for quitting or failing to achieve a goal you realized you weren't able to meet. Learn to not just accept your shortcomings, but also harness the emotions and lessons learned from the experience and strengthen yourself for the next goal you set for yourself. As long as you have the chance to try again, you have a reason to be hopeful and a reason to be happy. Or, as it's been said before,